Welcome to the Michigan Outdoors Report podcast, your weekly escape into the world of hunting, fishing, and everything wild in between. Whether you're deep in the woods, out on the water, or planning your next adventure, you're in the right place. So let's gear up and get out there.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Michigan Outdoors Report. Hope everybody's doing well, enjoying some hard water time or chasing bunnies, or whatever it is you're into. It's a fantastic time to be outdoors regardless. So I am joined tonight by Brad Mellon and Tim White, my co-staff this evening. How you doing, Brad?
Good, sir. How are you? How's everything going up there in the northern country?
You know what? I am in the Siberian blender right now. The UP is getting a good old-fashioned winter ass whooping. It's about 25, 30 degrees. It is cold, and we're experiencing a traditional UP winter like we haven't in a couple, 3 years.
I think I saw that we're actually expecting -8 down here in Tuscola County coming up Friday evening, and that's probably the coldest that I've seen in the 3 years I've been here. So I think Michigan's a little upset, and she's back to finish the winter out here. So,
well, the good news is it's definitely making ice.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Tim, what have you been doing lately, brother?
I'm just trying to stay warm. You know, I'm a little bit further south than you, Jordan, so I'm like 3 degrees warmer. But no, just been out in the hard water. Unfortunately, you and Brad couldn't join us, but this last weekend we had a fun weekend out at Fletcher's Pond over in Hillman, Michigan. Did a lot of ice fishing, caught, you name it, we probably caught it. All sorts of panfish, perch, crappie, a bullhead came through the ice, bass, pike, and Bill was fortunate enough to catch a nice brown trout, 23-inch brown trout out of a lake that's deepest point is 10 feet. So we were all kind of shocked to see a brown trout come out. It was beautiful. But we had a good time. We shared a lot of laughs, and apparently we've shared some sickness too. So starting to feel a little cruddy, and I know several of the other guys that went are under the weather, and that's why they're not here with us tonight. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes this coming weekend. I'm looking at those temps. I have some time off, but I don't know if I want to go out there in 10 below air temperature, probably 20, 30 below wind chill. So
yeah, I'm a little excited because as I drove around the head of the bay here in Barriga County this morning, in Keweenaw Bay to be precise, for the first time this year, there is ice starting to form out into the bay. And knock on wood, if that northwest wind doesn't come in here and just blow it all to pieces, we might actually get some hard water on Keweenaw Bay. And I would love to get out and get after some whitefish or some lakers. That'd be prime. Well, our other guest this evening, and most importantly, is Mr. Merle Jones. And he is the Public Relations Director for Michigan Trappers and Predator Callers Association. How are you doing today, Merle?
I'm doing pretty good. We're suffering with the same. I mean, I'm down in Kalamazoo County, but we got the same whole winter thing going on. You know, lake effect snow coming in. It's cold. I was supposed to go coyote hunting down in Illinois last weekend, but last Friday morning when I got up to get ready to go, I had a bit of the bug on myself, and I just decided that staying home was a smarter move. I have a tournament, a 2-day coyote tournament coming up, the Great Lakes Predator Challenge this weekend out of DNR Sports down here, and I'm really not all that excited about 2 nights of below zero weather coyote hunting. We're going to do it, so yeah.
Well, maybe it'll get them. Maybe it'll get them up on their feet.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Well, unless you live under a rock, at some point in the last 2 years, you've probably heard that there's been quite a conundrum in the natural resources realm regarding the issue of coyote season being reduced, being restored, all kinds of drama to beat the band over the last couple of years. It's been an arduous journey for MTPCA. And, you know, we just wanted to take some time tonight and give Merle the floor to share that journey and that process with us and tell us about how it started, the things they had to go through, and share with us how it all ended at the Natural Resources Commission meeting this last month. So, Merle, I guess start out by first telling us a little bit about what you do with your organization and what MTPCA is and stands for?
Michigan Trapper and Predator Callers Association. We're a statewide organization that promotes trapping and predator calling. 2009, prior to 2009, it was just Michigan Trappers. Expanded in 2009 to take on predator calling because predator management, the two disciplines, they mesh really well together. So my job with MTPCA, I'm the public relations director, and I took that role on, actually, it was about 2 years ago now, and this was the subject that got me into the position. An old friend of mine called me up, and I think that was actually back in fall of 23, and said that he heard some rumblings about the anti-hunters wanting to come and take away some of our coyote hunting ability, our predator management ability, or either take it away or modify it in some fashion. So, and I'd had some previous experience back in 2015 and 16. I was the point man for Bob Abbott's Michigan Predator Hunter for Center Fire at Night. Bob was the impetus to that and the brains behind it, but he didn't have the ability to really spend a lot of time on it. I was, at the time, I'm since retired, but I was a professional firefighter, which gave me some flexibility with my schedule. And also being a single man, that made it easier too. I didn't have to report to the big boss. So I ended up getting pretty neck deep in it then. And that gave me some background, and like I said, my friend called me up on this problem. I went to an MTPCA meeting, and they asked if I could step into the position of public relations director because I knew how to navigate the world, that particular section of the world, and so I got involved, and it turned into a lot bigger mess than I expected it to. I can tell you that. It wasn't what we had expected. It was not the anti-hunters. That was not the impetus to it. That was not where it came from. It's sad to say, but the impetus for that was it was self-induced pain. We had sportsmen in our state that they essentially, for whatever the reasons may be, they put a lot of emphasis on the predator callers' bad social media habits, which we've all got, all of our disciplines, all of our species that we do hunt and fish and trap here in Michigan. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't always make the wisest decisions. So we ended up with that seemed to be the low-hanging fruit at the time. And they used that social media fear as basically as a lever or a button to push to try and redact the season under the belief that if we weren't hunting coyotes during the spring when they supposedly, the dependent pups would starve to death, which isn't really the reality at all. But if we kept doing that, their argument was that the anti-hunters were gonna come in and get mad and take everything away and ban everything. So basically it was fear mongering at its greatest. Again, I can't speak to the specific reasons for that. I can make my assumptions, but at the end of the day, it was self-induced. Because one of the things that I really want to stress here is, I speak of myself as a predator caller. I'm from MTPCA, but we're all sportsmen. We're all outdoorsmen. We're all on the same team.
Absolutely.
There's no, those guys are doing this and those guys are doing that. If anybody on any, in any portion of our world is doing something foolish that is detrimental to our great outdoors, then we all need to collectively deal with those people internally and not get, the NRC or the DNR involved in it. And that's essentially what happened. So,
that's sure enough what got me fired up. I mean, I caught wind of some of this and had a little bit of pulse of what was going on. But what was most egregious to me, as you pointed out, is this wasn't an attack that came from, some far left tree hugging loony organization. This, in fact, was a left hook that came out of the ranks of sportsmen or so-called sportsmen. And that blew my mind when I first sat down and started trying to put this all together. And I'm like, what is going on? It blew my mind. I don't know if there's a bigger betrayal that's possible in the outdoor community than one group of sportsmen literally throwing another group of sportsmen under the legal bus and having, their privileges and their seasons revoked over sheer foolishness and posturing and political gamesmanship. It's mind blowing. From the moment that I had the opportunity to have conversation with you, Merle, it was very clear this was a fight that had to be fought. It had to be fought. It's not something that we could let go and just overlook it and and it had to be fought. So take us from the point where the assault was launched, so to speak, and then what came next? What was the reaction from the predator calling community and from your organization? Like, how did you respond? What was the next step after that sucker punch came in?
Well, so it's interesting because even today, I'm still finding bits and pieces of that assault being launched pre-2023. The most evident of that would be a couple of different things. And again, this is some of the stuff where, I've got bits and pieces of circumstantial evidence, but it shows up. It all melds together pretty well. The first official action was there was a vote at the 2023 Fur Bearer Work Group meeting up in St. Ignace, which was I don't remember the date, doesn't matter, but there was a vote there. And those for those that don't know, the Fur Bearer Work Group meeting, it's a stakeholder group, and the trappers, predator callers, anybody that's involved in the fur bearing species go to that meeting, and they discuss all the different topics of whatever it may be, whether it's coyotes or fisher or beaver or whatever, and it's discussion with the department. It's a department. When I say department, I use the term department for the DNR. It's a work group that's ran by the DNR, and it's to interact with the stakeholders, much like what the DAT is at the DAT now. Mm-hmm. So at that meeting, there was a vote or a poll taken. It's often described as a vote, which isn't correct, but there was basically a straw poll taken of the people present. And there was 10 people in that meeting. The consensus was that it would be a good idea to redact the season based upon this fear of social media and social perception and all that. After the fact, it became pretty evident. I wasn't at that meeting, unfortunately, but I interviewed everybody that was there, and independently, more than one of them suggested that the department led with this idea that supposedly came up in conversation at prior meetings. I don't have the evidence, the white papers to say who originated it, but there was a lot of discussion from the past where I think individuals were talking to the department and suggesting how terribly dangerous it was to continue hunting coyotes during that period of time because of the social perception. And so that was the official inception of it. Obviously, we got involved at that time when we heard the outcome of that meeting, started having discussions with the department and the NRC, because at that point it was the department was pretty dead set on putting that in the 2024 fur bearer cycle in the changes. And we obviously fought back against that. We put a lot of effort into basically discussing it with the commissioners, discussing it with the department, going to the meetings like we need to do. It was rapidly becoming apparent, though, that we were fighting a losing battle there. There was some rays of hope along the way, but you could see that the decision was kind of already made by the commission at that time. And they're, and it's kind of how things work. People have discussions with the commissioners and they do make decisions, and they move along that way. And It's our job to get involved and try and change that. So it wasn't going good. So prior to the March 2024 meeting, when the handwriting was on the wall, MTPCA, our board voted to enlist the aid of an attorney. We signed an agreement with Miller Johnson out of Grand Rapids, who's the Grand Rapids office. Miller Johnson's one of the bigger firms in the state, and they had some people in their staff that had already had past experience dealing with a couple of things: one, government agencies, and two, the NRC. So they weren't unfamiliar with the process, which was very helpful. And we put the effort in, tried to get it changed, and stopped at the NRC level in that March 24 meeting. But unfortunately, it went the wrong way, which gave us 14 days to then file if we were going to take a legal action.
Yeah.
So we filed, and that put us into court, which that turned into a big drawn out affair, a long drawn out affair, which is the nature of that beast. Nothing, once it gets into court, it doesn't work fast.
I want to pause there for just a moment, Merle. I think it's important to point out, prior to deciding on going down the legal road with this and presenting, an appeal, an official capacity, doing all those things, there was a lot of discussion that was had with the department, with the stakeholder groups, with the commission. There was a lot of discussion. And the troubling thing was, it appeared that there was absolutely no biological basis whatsoever for the decision, right, Merle?
Oh, exactly. And a couple things there. And I was headed there. A couple things there is we put them on notice. It wasn't like we blindsided them with the legal action. We put them on notice. We told them, we said, as far as we're concerned, the decision you're making is strictly political and social. It was not based upon any actual real, like Proposal G science. I mean, and then of course the commission at the time, the chair at the time, came back and said, "Oh, well, we're applying social science." We said, "Well, that's not acceptable. That's just not acceptable, because that's not sure, social science, depending on the argument, can be considered as science, but that's not the intent of Proposal G." Proposal G was natural science being applied to the management of our natural resources. And for anybody that's listening doesn't know, Proposal G was voted in. It was a ballot initiative in 1996 that ironically was as a response to Proposal D, which was an attempt to ban different types of bear management. And the response to that was Proposal G, and it was an overwhelming success. Proposal G got Proposal D, I'm sorry, the attempt to limit bear management, absolutely got obliterated. Proposal G, on the other hand, it was voted in by 68.7% of the voters in the state, which is an overwhelming success in any ballot initiative.
Oh yeah, super majority.
Yeah, super majority. And I mean, and if you look at the numbers, it blew away. It just blew away the anti-hunting opposition, and that is a mandate that things are not done. Things are not managed via politics; they're managed via natural science, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but the intent of it is that you manage things, based upon the reality of what nature is, not people's personal opinions and emotion. So again, we put them on notice. We told them, don't do this, because we're going to end up in a bit of an argument about it. And they proceeded to justify it in the way they thought they could. So we filed our appeal.
Their justification being social science is science.
That was their justification, yes. I don't know in any way, shape, or form how you can justify that. It makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. The reality is this is a simple one to me. The reality is the animals, the water, the trees, all this stuff in our state, none of it gives a crap about our opinions or our emotions. It doesn't. Okay. The coyotes don't care about my hurt feelings or somebody else's hurt feelings. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, we ended up in court. Now the unfortunate thing is, actually, this is a interesting thing. I tell you what, before I get into the court's opinion of things, is there any more questions you got?
No, I'm good. Tim, Brad, you got anything up to this point?
Well, that's what I had heard. It seemed like they were kind of trying to hide behind the aspect of switching over and using it as a deer control issue, is what I've seen a lot of people talking about.
No.
Was using it as obviously when you always hear people talk about, well, it's mating season, be careful, keep your dogs in, keep this stuff going. I mean, maybe this is me being off subject, but this is where I think, because a lot of people in my area, this is where everybody talked about it, and that's where everybody started to get angry, because I'm completely surrounded by farms. So we hear them. I hear gunshots all the time out here at nighttime because guys are hunting, and it's coyote, especially yotes out here is big time, coyotes and raccoons, and that's what they were all upset about, was like, we're worrying about one problem that they're tossing licenses at, but yet we're going to close down something that we feel like is helping the herd develop, because most of the coyote hunters and stuff and night hunters and trappers are just as big a deer hunters. And I guess that right there summed up one of my questions, and it's kind of a false accusation apparently.
Yeah. So on the deer thing, it's interesting because there's a lot of people out there that thought, that, this was a DNR NRC collusion with the insurance companies to try and, thin the deer herd. And I can tell you that, and I'm not saying that maybe there wasn't something of that somewhere in existence at some time, but I can tell you I've dug pretty far and deep and wide and long, and I can't find any evidence of that. And at the end of the day, I discussed this at NRC meetings, and I brought it up. I'm the one that actually brought that idea up, because I'm like, hey, I did it in front of commissioners. I'm like, for anybody that has this in their head that more coyotes equals better deer management, you basically you're lost, because at the end of the day, you have essentially in Michigan right now, you got two basic deer problems to oversimplify it.
Right.
Down here in Kalamazoo County, I got deer coming out my deer. I mean, there's more deer than we know what to do with, right?
Right.
Well, for us to impact that herd and try and reduce it by having more coyotes, you're going to have, if you get enough coyotes to fix that, you're going to have more coyote problems than you ever wanted to think about.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with livestock.
Yeah.
I mean, around here, there's a lot of cattle, and there's a lot of, okay, we're going to say home chicken farmers. Right. Everybody's got that problem. Where are they going? What's the easiest target for them?
Right.
So that was always my defense.
It's just a really poor answer. The answer to the deer problem is, quite frankly, the same answer that we have to the coyote management problem, and that is to enable hunters to do things properly.
Right.
So the flip side to that is you get into the areas like, where there's struggles in the UP, and of course there's other predators up there, but in any area where you're trying to bolster a population of an animal like white-tailed deer, where it's thin, at that point any amount of overpredation is going to be a really detrimental impact. So it just the two don't relate very well. So yeah, we basically dispelled that myth, and again, I never found any actual real evidence of that being a real discussion anyway.
Right. It was discussed between a lot of people around that I've talked to about it in these areas and stuff like that, and that was their first go-to, you know what I mean, quote unquote.
Well, and I'm glad you brought it up, though, because one of the things that really is detrimental to our community, our overall community of sportsmen, is so often we get those misinformations or urban myths. Or it's like I still have people telling all the time saying, boy, well, if the DNR had never planted coyotes here in the first place, we wouldn't have this problem. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, there's just I can't find a shred of evidence that
Well, and I
ever
mean, that boils down to what's one of the fastest things that spreads in anywhere in a state in America, and that's a rumor. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
especially social media wise, it can compile so fast. And that was why I was sitting here listening to you. Something I wanted to bring up and see if there was actual backing information on that. And because I always sat there and thought, well, why would they? Why that? There's no reasoning behind that. Number one, like Jordan and I talked earlier this week, do we really even have an actual number of our deer herd? Do we actually have a number of the predator herd? There's no way we'd ever be able to determine that to where they could scientifically figure out that would be an either detrimental additive or if it would be a negative effect. And it was always, to me, it was a rumor, but it was just something that popped in my head while we were sitting here listening.
Yeah.
Try as I might, I have still to this day never been able to track down any witnesses to this whole, Black Ops wolf reintroduction thing that took place by helicopter in the middle of the night. There's no witnesses.
Well, I talked to one witness one time, and it was this, this was quite a few years ago when I was a little bit of a younger man, and I was talking to this young lady mid-state that swore on a stack of Bibles that she saw it happening, and I was sitting in a pub at the time talking to her, and I really didn't want to tell her. I figured I'd wait to tell her how absurd that idea was until after she hated me.
Right.
At the moment, I had other things in my mind, so I didn't really. Anyway, but again, good point. The like you said, the rumor stuff, how that spreads, and the other good point that you just brought up, which is a really important one, is the measures of science it would take to find out like how many coyotes there are in the state or how many deer there are in the state. We had this the other day during another discussion about beavers, and our opponents, one, as a matter of fact, it came up about coyotes at the last NRC meeting. One of the gentlemen from one of the anti-hunting groups said that there was no way that the department or the commission could say that the recent decision was in any way based upon science because they had no idea what the population was in the state in the first place. So they want to, on one hand, they want to talk out of one side of their mouth and talk about we can apply social science and emotion and opinion, which is just absurd. But then on the other hand, they want this stringent extremism of we have to have an exact count of live animals, which is even more absurd because it's not really even possible. And even if it was, the amount of time and effort to try and do that is ridiculous. And the cost to manage at that point would be beyond, you just couldn't do it. So one of the things that we pushed really hard, MTPCA pushed really hard, was the simple logic of science. Sometimes really the best way to look at things. And I used the analogy a couple of times of, if you're going to change the oil on, the 8V92 in your tractor and you get the 1 gallon oil pan that you use for your Honda Civic, and you pull the drain plug out of the oil pan, it becomes rapidly evident that oil pan is going to overflow. I just applied scientific reasoning to that problem, and I know what my solution is. Okay, I don't have to wait to figure out that I don't have to go get the spec book and say, look, that 8V92 takes 9 gallons of oil. I just know I got a problem. I got to put the plug back in.
How do you know how many ounces of oil do you have?
Right. You just so it,
did you account for burn off too? You got to account for burn. It might only be 8.7. So
all I know is that little teeny pan on the ground is going to overflow. So it doesn't have to be that hard, and of course they want to make it that way. And I shouldn't say they, because one of the things I've done during these entirety of these arguments is I try and stay away from saying they, because then we lump things into groups. And our commission, the NRC, it was a very different commission when we had the problem back in 24 than it is today, and that is because of individuals. So, anyways, I'm getting a little philosophical here, but we got to think about it in terms of individual people and not lumps and days. So
Right.
So I kind of got off track here, but so
the suit commenced.
Yep. So the suit commenced. Of course, that got lawyers involved, and they had to do all kinds of review of everything and all the details and the backs and forths, and that stuff takes some time. The end result of that was we ended up the court that we ended up in front of, the judge that we ended up in front of in Ingham County ended up levying a opinion that was unfavorable to us. Essentially what that judge said was that the commission operated within its authority. And there's some detail here, and I've got this on my other screen here. So judge said that because the NRC may not consider, quote, politics and other non-scientific considerations, unquote, when making wildlife statements, then quote, this court's analysis disregards the portions of the March 14th decision referencing social and public perceptions. So the judge essentially said that you can't use those perceptions, the social and public perceptions, to make those decisions, and therefore the judge disregarded. It was the only use of the word disregard in all 177 pages. The judge disregarded our evidence of the wrongdoing. Now, the problem with that was, so the judge essentially said we were right, but then disregarded our evidence and said that the commission operated within their authority. The problem that left us within was, at that point, we would have had to make another appeal and go to the higher appeal court, which obviously costs a lot more money, but it also had a lot higher risk. The return on investment was not that great. The odds of succeeding with that were pretty slim, like maybe a 1 in 3 chance. So now you got to weigh your decisions. What do you do? The good news is by the time that opinion had happened, and I'm not going to say that MTPCA or anything I did, I'm not going to say that I can take credit for this, but I'm going to say that by the time the judge ruled, gave that opinion, the commission had changed several personnel, and the makeup of the commission was quite a bit different by that time. And
it
then
was a different day than before.
It was a very different day than before. And that left us in a position where we had people that we could have intelligent, logical conversations with and present our information and have it heard. That's what we proceeded to go about doing. So last August at the NRC meeting in Gaylord at Treetops, the commission collectively, with a unanimous vote, voted on a resolution that agreed with us, agreed with MTPCA, agreed with our position, and that resolution also was their promise to take action and correct the problem. So even though there was a bad court opinion, one of the ways I look at this as a really major win is we didn't have to have the court tell the commission how to fix their problem. Even in the commission at that point literally could have said, we're done talking to you guys. Mm-hmm. You're wrong, and moved along and ignored us. And then it would have been a huge, no. Instead, that commission, the new commission, with the new commissioners, with the new chair, they looked at what we said, agreed with our position on that. They agreed with our arguments. They stated that publicly, and they promised to make a change, and they came through and they made the change. It took us some time to get there, but they did make the change.
You know, Merle, I was at that meeting, myself and Robert. We were at that meeting in Gaylord, and you know, there was a lot of promise that things were going to get reinstated back to a year-round hunt. And I remember they recessed. What was it, like an hour and a half? They
Yeah.
recessed for quite a while, emptied the room out, at least an hour and a half, and then they came back and they voted unanimously on a resolution. And you know, they used the verbiage that just passed recently here, and there was just so much confusion in that room. I remember, I think I saw you, Merle, go up and talk to one of the commissioners, like, what just happened here? Because it
Well,
was just kind of confusing, the wording of the whole situation. And
yeah, it was, and actually, it was Commissioner Nyberg, Commissioner Dave Nyberg, and I give him a lot of credit for that. And actually, I sat there and I knew what happened. I was not expecting it to happen, but when it happened, I was like, okay. And I just sat there and I was digesting it. And they adjourned, and he walked right over to me, and I give him credit for this. He walked right straight over to me, and he's like, okay, do you understand what just happened? And I'm like, yes, I do, but I'm not sure I understand why. And I wasn't unhappy with the what, but I was pretty confused about the why.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and there was a lot of confusion. And of course, as you know, I mean, it hit the news that, man, we're back to a year-round coyote season when we weren't, you know, and of course that went on for several more months. But the why was essentially this. They recognized the problem, and they wanted to find a solution to that problem that they could get behind unanimously, because they did realize that as volatile as that thing had become, and now it was under the microscope of the anti-hunting world. It has been very much under that microscope. It's been, I mean, they've literally flown people in from under other parts of the country, the anti-hunters have, to participate in this stuff since then. So they wanted to make sure that the solution that they came up with was the most defensible position they could put themselves in. So they didn't have to worry about, you know, more lawsuits, more problems, you know, more. They didn't want to worry about, you know, inflaming legislative action or ballot initiatives or anything like that. So,
yeah.
it was frustrating at the time. Obviously, you know, nobody was more frustrated than me. But looking back at it now, what I've learned and watching that, you know, and being part of that process unfolding to get to where we got, I got to give some credit where credit's due. And a lot of that does, again, go back to Dave Nyberg. You know, that's his background, you know, legal background. And he kind of was the architect of that. You know, obviously he had the support of the commission, but, you know, he was the architect of that resolution. And they actually, over the course of last fall, they actually I think there was three different resolutions that they made a resolution to support their first resolution, and then they made another resolution to modify. It's like, I'm going, okay. But again, it worked. And we, through the course of that MTPCA, we pushed back on a couple items, you know, about the solution that we just didn't necessarily agree with. They really weren't super significant, but the solution that we came up with, that they came up with based upon our complaints, was what we have today. Is we have the ability for year-round harvest. We can harvest coyotes 365 days out of the year, but it's called two different things. And people are like, "Oh, why do you got to call it two different things?" And well, the reasoning for that was it built the most defensible position, because at the end of the day, the reality is what we do for coyote hunting is primarily management. if you were to hunt coyotes or trap coyotes only during a time of the year, a consumptive use time of the year, that's going to narrow your ability to about 3 months, basically, because that's the only time they really have, usable fur. So anything outside of that is management. So essentially what they did is they called a spade a spade. They're no longer trying to smoke and mirrors. It's like, this is done for purposes of management. And one of the great things that came out of it is there's a little line in the new order, the new amendment 10 of 2025, that says for purposes of interspecies conflict and overabundance. And that seems like a pretty insignificant little line, but it's actually the precedent going forward. Could end up being a pretty powerful thing in a lot of other instances. That, yeah, we actually came out with a pretty dang good solution after the end of all of it. So I'm trying to think. I feel like maybe I missed something along the way there, Jordan. So if you got any questions.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of want to wind back to the tape just a little bit to pre-lawsuit. MTPCA is not a national organization. They're not a safari club or a Whitetails Unlimited, right? You're kind of a smaller grassroots Michigan-based organization. There must have been some pretty emotional conversations, some debate, perhaps even a bit of a divided locker room. Like these guys over here are like, we got to fight for this. We got to stand up. We got to speak up. And the other guys over there are like, well, I don't know. That's a lot of money. What are we going to do? Like, explain how that went. Like, what was the tenor of that conversation amongst MTPCA leadership leading up to that? Like, what was everybody on the same page and just resolute about the direction that needed to be taken, or what did that look like?
So on a board level, it's a board decision. On a board level, everybody was very resolute on it, and it was the realization that the fight really had very little to do with 3 months of coyote season. What the fight had to do, what the reality of the big fight was, it was about defending Proposal G. It was about defending our ability to manage our natural resources well. It was about defending our responsibility to those natural resources. And the realization was really, everybody came to it, immediately, was that when the NRC, when the 2024 NRC was making that decision, and they were publicly almost bragging that they were making it based upon public perception, opinion, social science. At that point, everybody was full on board. We got to stand up against this, and MTPCA has been around for a while. We are a statewide organization, so we've been putting money in the bank for legal defense. The UP trappers pitched in. There's 2 different trapping organizations up there. Other organizations pitched in. Michigan bow hunters. Boy, I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed right now, and I'm going to make a note of this for any future podcast or anything that I do, to make sure that I can get those names out there. But a lot of people did pitch in.
That was my impression, is that there was a groundswell of support behind MTPCA once you guys kind of declared your intent and said, no, we're doing this.
Yes, there was a huge Michigan United Conservation Clubs, they got on board. That didn't necessarily, the way that happened didn't necessarily work out to the best for us, because we ended up, and this was an attorney thing. The attorneys are like, well, let's file 2 different, parallel suits, which should give us, a better standing. But the problem with that is that ended up, we would have, if it had just been MTPCA, we probably would have been in a court in the UP, and that we would got a different decision, and we believe. But whatever, that's water under the bridge. We ended up in Ingham County. So MUCC was heavily involved. Other organizations, like I said, got behind us with, financially. We had help from, once we got going, we had help from Safari Club International. The DC officers reached out to me and they supported us with attorneys. We also had help from the National Fur Takers of America and the National Trapping Association. They got behind us. So it was, it took our grassroots local group to stand up and lead the charge. But then we had that support behind us. And that's something that the sportsmen in the state got to understand, is how important that is. We can't rely on national organizations to lead the fights.
Louder for those in the back.
Yeah. So,
right.
But yeah, there was a ton. You're right. There was a groundswell when we got rolling with it. Man, my phone was ringing off the hook, and we were, meeting with people, and people were helping us financially. I mean, obviously, I will say this, not, I'll put in a shameless plug here for MTPCA. We still, we're still paying the bills on that. A lot of money came in, but it was expensive. So, we can take all the donations we can get. We have a donation link set up on the MTPCA website. Membership's great. Members are great. You don't have to be a trapper or predator caller. We can, members are great, but the membership keeps the light on. Our legal defense fund, that's a whole nother thing. And I had people ask me along the line. It's like, well, what happens if, you collect more money than you need? Are you guys going to go have a barbecue? And it's like, no, there's no such thing as collecting more money than you need, because that legal defense fund will, that thing is there. As long as MTPCA exists, that money is going to be there for legal defense. And there's probably going to be more problems. Trapping and predator calling is kind of low hanging fruit. The anti-hunters hate us. They hate everybody, but they hate us even worse. And they, I can tell you this, in the March 2024 meeting where that commission voted to redact the season, the anti-hunters, who they flew people in out of state for that, they walked out of that room. They were standing out in the lobby, and they were discussing coming after bobcat hunting and killing contests.
I remember that.
Yep. And for anybody that paid attention, in August of last year, it was August 10th, as a matter of fact, a group called Project Coyote, who's been pretty successful. They've been averaging just about a state a year getting tournaments. Coyote, and they've evolved. It used to be just coyote tournaments. Now they're coming after any killing contests they can. They call them killing contests because it makes it a lot more marketable. But they if you go to their website, they talked about they're coming to Michigan to shut down killing contests. And that's not just coyotes. That will be squirrel roundups, raccoons, fishing, you name it.
Doe derby.
Yep, they want to shut it all down. No more buck poles. That's their goal. There's no hiding that that's their goal. They want to take it all away. So,
Tim, did you have something there?
Yeah, no, when you're talking about all the organizations coming together and support, I was just kind of point out, it seems like it came full circle, because it was the hunting community that kind of started all this in a negative way, but then to come full circle and get all that support in the end, to turn things back around. That was one thing I was going to mention earlier, is I knew a lot of what was going on, and as far as hiding behind the guise of social science and those things, I never knew it was our actual own community that kind of stoked the flames of this fire. I'm still kind of in shock by that, I guess.
So let me clarify that for you. Jordan hit the nail on the head. It was so-called sportsmen, and it wasn't our community. It was individuals within our community. It was individuals that made decisions that weren't necessarily, to my understanding, well favored even by some of their own organizations people. I've had personal conversations that have elaborated on that pretty deeply. So those individuals, it's the they thing versus the they. It's rarely is it a they. It's usually a somebody. every good or bad idea usually starts with an individual, and that's what it was. So I guess maybe I'm as guilty as the next guy about talking about how it came from our own community. I shouldn't. It was it was some specific individuals with a pretty, I would say, in my opinion, a pretty selfish agenda. So
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, the thing about all that you went through, Merle, I just want to take my hat off to you and to MTPCA for having the guts and the resilience, the commitment, and the grit to see this through. Because somebody could make the argument, well, this was a David and Goliath. This is the little, the Coyote Club here against the mighty state of Michigan. And you guys got up out of your chair and you said, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to stand for what's right. We're going to defend Proposal G. We're going to speak up. We're going to put our money where our mouth is, literally and figuratively. And you fought the good fight, not only for your own cause, but on behalf of all sportsmen in the state of Michigan. Because as you said, this wasn't about just 3 months of coyote season. It was much bigger than that. It was about sound science. It was about Proposal G and upholding that ballot initiative of We the People. And I just commend you and your organization for the mountain of work and blood and sweat and tears that went into this. And I couldn't be happier for you, Merle, and for all the predator callers, trappers out there that endured the sacrifice for this. To see you guys come out with a W at the commission meeting this month, man, I'm just elated for you.
Well, I appreciate it, Jordan. I really do, because it is it definitely was. There was a more than a bit of work that went into it over the last. I was actually this afternoon. I was thinking about it, and this stretches back to 2023. That's how long this problem has been going on. And again, it's one of those things where we have to, and I'm going to use the collective word here. We, all of us, everybody, outdoorsmen, doesn't care. I don't care what the species or discipline is. We have to collectively keep, our nose to the grindstone on this stuff, because we don't understand. I will say this. I think the average outdoorsman, sportsman today, for all the problems that we have in Michigan, and I'm not going to, try and shine anybody on that we don't have them, and collectively, I don't think we understand how fortunate we are to have Proposal G. That's a pretty powerful tool for us. And we've got a lot of other things on our side that a lot of people don't realize, but that one right there, it's not perfect. We just saw that. We have to fight to defend it, because if it gets ruined, if that tool gets broken, it's going to be really hard to repair it. Did we get the perfect win out of it? No, the perfect win would have been a court decision in our favor, but the court decision also didn't necessarily do any more damage. And as I mentioned earlier, the reality that our actions forced a different perspective, and we got change, a voluntary change from that commission, so that commission was operating like it needs to operate. That's the whole point. That was the whole point of it anyway. And that voluntary win, in a lot of ways, is a lot more powerful than a forced win by a court. We got to keep working. We got to keep working on that. We can't just rest on our laurels and say, okay, yeah, we got to build on that. But yeah, we're lucky in Michigan. We just got to make sure that we recognize that, and we take advantage of it, and we work hard to support it.
Well, and it becomes such a huge milestone. Sorry, Jordan, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it becomes such a huge milestone too, that shows other groups that might be fighting for their cause that it's possible. It's absolutely possible for a smaller group to go against, like Jordan was saying, you climb that mountain and you made it to the top and you stuck your flag in it and you said, this is what we're going to stand by. And you, like you said, you made them admit and tweak where they were wrong or felt that they were wrong. And that says a lot to a lot of different there's a lot of different groups out here that do a lot of different things, whether it's a walleye fisherman or a bass fishing club or, different things. There's always regulations that seem to affect them that could be too far, could be not enough. And I think that just shows that it is possible to, as a group, climb that mountain and succeed in making it there. So again, like Jordan said, kudos to you for the fight that you guys put on, and pretty awesome to see,
Well, and I appreciate that, but also thank you for bringing that up, because that your perspective on it is so incredibly important. And I'm not, and I'm going to go back all the way to 2015-16 when Bob Abbott decided that we needed to be able to use center fire rifles at night. We had a 6-person group that got that done. I was the point guy, but there was 6 of us. Wasn't one. And then today's world, Jonathan Durka in the Spearfishing Association, here just in December they got, I think it was December meeting, right? They got the new regs passed for that.
Walleye spearing.
Yeah, one dude with a passion and a handful of people for help, and what he got done there, and most importantly, he really emphasized that one of the things we've struggled with our department for a long time is they oftentimes have this mentality that, well, that doesn't affect enough sportsmen to matter. It doesn't affect enough stakeholders to matter. Well, the spearfishing guys with Jonathan Durka, that's the epitome of that statement. And that statement should never, as far as I'm concerned, those guys want to go out there and enjoy our great outdoors, enjoy a sport that they love. And Proposal G in the national or the Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act in Michigan, it states right in there that we're a shall state. Meaning if we want to, we shall be able to. Okay, not they may tell us we can. The department's the agency of science, the Natural Resources Commission, they're the regulatory body. We, as citizens, based upon those rules, we have the right to go do that stuff. More importantly, we have the responsibility, but we also have the right. So your point there is a fantastic point that, yes, I hope everybody that hears this, that's probably one of the best points. If they missed anything else, that the little guy, you don't have to have some national organization. You just have to be resolute in your cause and get it done. So
in our final stanza tonight, I just want to get out my framing hammer and drive that 16 penny nail just a little bit deeper. I have beat the drum for a long time on numerous podcasts, outdoor media, radio, television, etc., that stewardship is an action word. It's not something we say. It's not a buzzword. It's not a piece of paper. Stewardship is an action word, and we have such wonderful resources to use here in the state of Michigan with the Great Lakes, tremendous fisheries, wonderful sprawling wilderness in the Upper Peninsula, all kinds of wonderful opportunities at our fingertips. But they don't endlessly self-sustain. That's our job as stewards, to be the watchmen in the night and to make sure that those resources are safeguarded, that these rights are protected, not only for ourselves, but the generations to come, for all that come after us. And, advocacy and policies, so to speak, we've had a semi-dry conversation about attorneys and courts and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? That's also part of stewardship. It's not just planting trees. It's not just deciding, well, I need to take a few does off my property this year. Okay. This is where the metal hits the meat with stewardship. It's the less fun, the less sexy part of our responsibility as outdoorsmen, hunters, and fishermen in the state of Michigan to step up to the plate and gladly shoulder our share of this burden, securing the heritage and the future of our natural resources and all those that come after us to enjoy them. And, again, Merle, I just can't thank you and MTPCA enough for stepping up and standing your post and being that watchman and doing what you did. It's absolutely fantastic. And, I know something about that process, as you know, per our conversations, Merle.
Yeah.
I was neck deep in an issue with antlerless deer in the Superior watershed archery tags for 10 years. 10 years. And if there's one thing that I can offer our listeners, don't ever adopt this disposition that, what can I do? Well, I'm just one man. I'm just, this little organization. One person can very much make a difference. One little organization can make a difference. And the other thing that often follows that, Merle, and I'm sure that you've heard this, is the cop out. Well, they don't listen anyway. Well, here's my reply to that. They're surely not listening if you're not talking.
100%.
And Merle, I'll kind of give you the final word to that end. Close us out tonight, my friend.
Well, I got two things, I guess, and exactly what you just said. The only thing I really want to emphasize on top of that is that stewardship. Most importantly, it's the fight for somebody that can't fight for themselves, fighting for the resource. We're the only animal on the face of the earth that has the cognitive ability to manage those resources for a greater good. And if we don't, shame on us. So that's a big thing right there. And of course, the other thing I got to, a little more shameless plug here, but, pay attention to MTPCA. We've got coming up here, hopefully within the next week. Obviously, the point of this is we just got our ability to harvest coyotes back year round. There's going to be some, it's pretty important. I want to make sure that people know to pay attention to the Facebook page. We're going to get a posting on there that clarifies in layman's terms, not, legalese, so people understand what the reality of that is. And obviously, if there's any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, because I want to make sure that everybody clearly understands. So, there's not confusion and people getting in trouble out there. So,
well, for any of our listeners out there that are interested in learning more about MTPCA or potentially becoming members of the organization, what resources can you direct people to that are looking for more information?
We've got a group, a Facebook group it is a private group, so you gotta apply to that and make sure you get. We do have a Facebook page that's open that anybody can go to, and we do also have mtpca.com is our web page. It is under rebuild right now, so what we have there looks a little rough, but there's a membership link on there and a donation link, and both of those are working. Again, the donation link goes straight to the legal defense fund, just for situations like this. But there's information there. It's a little sketchy to read through right now. It's a little rough, but pay attention, because we do have a brand new website in progress, and hopefully that'll be up here very soon. So.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening, Merle, and to all of our listeners out there. We hope that you got something out of this. Sometimes podcasts are more entertaining, sometimes they're more informative, but it's important to hang in there and listen to some of those gritty podcasts like this one here this evening, because you know what? An informed sportsman is never going to be taken advantage of. I'll tell you that much. Again, thank you, Merle. Thank you, MTPCA. And for those who are able, please check those guys out and see if you can put a couple bucks in the hat, help them out. They stood for you. Let's make sure we support them. Until next time, everybody, enjoy the great outdoors.